There is something terrifying about the people who choose to be alone. Not the lonely, not the rejected, but the ones who choose solitude, deliberately, consciously, almost ruthlessly. In a world where constant noise defines our existence, buzzing phones, endless notifications, fake smiles, shallow conversation, there are rare individuals who quietly walk away. They vanish from the crowd, retreat into their own inner worlds, and build fortresses of thought around themselves. Most people see this as weakness. They whisper, something must be wrong with them. Why don't they fit in? But Schopenhauer saw something else. Agnes Callard sees something else. I see something else. Because within that terrifying silence hides a kind of intelligence that most people will never experience. It's the intelligence of the ones who dare to confront the truth about the world, about themselves, about existence itself. And today, we are going to explore the four most terrifying traits of these rare minds. From Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher of solitude and suffering, to Agnes Callard, the modern voice reigniting Socratic inquiry, we'll uncover what sets these people apart, and why, if you've ever craved silence over noise, this video might feel like a mirror you didn't know you were standing in front of. Part 1. Schopenhauer and the Fortress of Solitude. Arthur Schopenhauer once wrote, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone, and if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom, for it is only when he is alone that he is really free." For Schopenhauer, solitude wasn't an escape, it was a weapon. He believed the world was driven by an endless, meaningless will to survive, a chaotic force pushing humans to chase pleasure, power, and recognition, all while drowning deeper in suffering. And yet, there were exceptions. There were those who could step outside this chaos, not by defeating the world, but by detaching from it. These individuals, according to Schopenhauer, carry a kind of terrifying intelligence, an awareness so sharp that it forces them to turn inward, to retreat from the social theater where everyone wears masks, and instead, live authentically within the depths of their own thoughts. He observed that average minds crave constant distraction, endless conversation, shallow entertainment, the comfort of belonging, but the truly intelligent often find these things exhausting. They recognize the absurdity of the social game, the gossip, the comparisons, the race for validation, and so they choose to walk away. This isn't about hating people. It's about recognizing something deeper, that truth rarely lives in the crowd. In the crowd, there's safety, but there's also noise, and that noise drowns out the whispers of the soul. For Schopenhauer, solitude is not loneliness, it is freedom. And freedom, he warns, is terrifying, because when you strip away the voices, the distractions, the illusions, you are left with only yourself. Most people can't handle that. That's why they cling to constant company, not because they love others, but because they fear the silence inside their own minds. But the ones who can handle it, the ones who sit in that silence, confront their pain, and carve meaning out of emptiness, those are the ones Schopenhauer believed had pierced the veil. And yet, there's something cold about Schopenhauer's solitude. For him, withdrawing was an act of survival, but he didn't necessarily believe it would save us. That's where Agnes Callard enters the story. Part 2. Agnes Callard and the Fire of Socratic Desire. Agnes Callard, one of today's most provocative philosophers, takes the discussion of solitude somewhere unexpected. Unlike Schopenhauer, she doesn't see withdrawal as an end. She sees it as a beginning. In her book Aspiration and her work on Socratic dialogue, she argues something radical, that solitude is not about rejecting the world, but about transforming the self. For Callard, intelligence isn't defined by how much you know. It's defined by your hunger to understand. She believes the rarest, most powerful kind of mind is the one that lives in a state of becoming, constantly questioning, constantly doubting, constantly seeking. This is where solitude becomes terrifying, because when you step away from the crowd, You no longer have their voices to reassure you, to tell you what to believe, to hand you ready-made answers. You are left with questions. And for Callard, that's the point. This is what Socrates meant when he said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Solitude forces examination. It forces you to wrestle with the big questions. Who am I when no one is watching? Why do I want the things I want? Is the life I'm living truly mine, or just borrowed from other people's expectations? Callard believes that the people who choose solitude are building something inside themselves. They are crafting their identity, shaping their desires, and training their minds to think beyond the scripts handed to them by society. Where Schopenhauer's solitude is about retreat, Callard's solitude is about creation. It's active. It's restless. It's dangerous. Because when you begin questioning everything, you risk dismantling the very foundation of who you thought you were. And yet those who dare to enter this space often emerge reborn. Not because they find all the answers, but because they learn to live inside the questions. Part 3. The third terrifying trait, power over the mind. There is a strange paradox about those who choose solitude. The world sees them as weak, as if avoiding crowds is a form of surrender, as if silence signals defeat. But in reality, these individuals develop something far more dangerous: mental sovereignty. Most people live their entire lives in a state of quiet hypnosis. They don't know what they want. They don't know who they are. They spend their days absorbing borrowed desires from advertisements, social trends, and the voices of the people around them. But the ones who walk away from the crowd, who embrace solitude deliberately, begin to reclaim their thoughts. This is where Schopenhauer's insights
meet modern neuroscience.
Without him even knowing it. He believed that solitude was the only way to escape the will, that blind, restless force that makes us chase pleasure endlessly, only to be crushed by disappointment. When you step away from the constant pull of society, you stop feeding this machine of desires. You become capable of seeing where your impulses come from, how your fears are manufactured, and how easily crowds are manipulated. This clarity of thought, this meta-awareness, is terrifying both to you and to the world. To you, because it forces you to confront the emptiness beneath the surface of so many ambitions. And to the world, because a person who cannot be manipulated is a person who cannot be controlled. Agnes Callard pushes this even further. She argues that solitude grants us something even rarer than independence. It gives us the space to choose what kind of person we want to become. Most people inherit their beliefs. They inherit their careers, their ambitions, their morality, not by conscious choice, but by passive absorption. But when you step back into silence, you start hearing the inner voice beneath the noise. That's when you begin constructing yourself. Not reacting, not imitating, but creating. This is the third terrifying trait of those who choose solitude. They master their minds, they choose their desires, and they become self-authors of their existence. It's a kind of power that society secretly fears, because people who know who they are can no longer be controlled by algorithms, by trends, or by the demands of the herd, but that power comes at a cost. And this cost leads us to the fourth terrifying trait. Part 4. The fourth terrifying trait, freedom that burns. Freedom sounds beautiful until you realize what it really demands. Most people say they want freedom, but what they actually want is comfort disguised as freedom. A life where someone else makes the hard decisions, sets the rules, defines what success looks like, and hands them a ready-made identity to wear. Choosing solitude destroys that illusion. Schopenhauer believed that true freedom was impossible in the crowd, because the crowd traps you in its endless loops of status games, comparing, competing, chasing validation, all while convincing yourself you're acting freely. When you step out of that system, You gain freedom, yes, but you also lose the comforting script that society provides. There is no roadmap anymore, no guaranteed answers, no cheering audience. That's why this kind of freedom burns. Agnes Callard frames this differently. She says solitude transforms us into seekers, people who are willing to live inside uncertainty. The terrifying thing about questioning everything is that you never get to stand on solid ground again. Callard calls this the aspirational life, a life where you are always reaching, always expanding, never fully settled into what you are, because you're too busy becoming what you could be. That kind of existence isn't peaceful. It's restless, raw, and unending. And yet, for the intelligent few, it is the only way to live. This is why society misunderstands people who choose solitude. They assume these individuals are running away from life, but often, they are the only ones running toward it, toward a truer, deeper confrontation with meaning. Yet here lies the paradox. This freedom disconnects you from the majority of people. The conversations that once fascinated you begin to feel shallow. The goals others obsess over start to seem meaningless, and sometimes you find yourself in a place where no one can follow, a place where you carry a wisdom others aren't ready to hear. This loneliness can be unbearable, and yet it is in this very loneliness that a deeper transformation begins. Which brings us to the fifth terrifying trait. Part 5. The fifth terrifying trait, living beyond the crowd. Here is the ultimate truth. The people who choose solitude don't just think differently, they exist differently. Once you've seen the machinery behind society's illusions, you cannot unsee it. Once you've tasted the freedom of your own mind, you cannot return to dependence. This is what Schopenhauer warned, that solitude grants knowledge, but knowledge is a burden. He wrote, "The more a man has in himself, the less he will depend upon others." But he also implied something darker, that the more you see, the harder it becomes to belong. Agnes Callard offers a softer hope. She suggests that this distance from the crowd isn't isolation forever. It's preparation. It's not that you reject humanity. It's that you want to engage with it authentically, without the masks, without the performance, without bending yourself to fit someone else's expectations. This is why people with terrifying intelligence often walk alone for a while. Not because they hate the world, but because they're rebuilding their relationship with it. They descend into solitude to burn away everything false. And when they return, if they return, they are not the same. Byung-Chul Han calls this the quiet rebellion of the digital age. When you stop being a product of the system, when you stop chasing constant connectivity, you reclaim the rarest treasure of all, your own mind. And so those who choose solitude live beyond the crowd. They are not distracted by meaningless conflict, not seduced by shallow praise, not enslaved by hollow success. They carry something heavier, and in carrying it, they become something rarer. The world may call them strange. Society may label them misfits, outcasts, rebels, but history remembers them differently, because the ones who dare to walk away are often the ones who build the paths that the rest of us eventually follow. Part 6. The sixth terrifying trait. The courage to face the abyss. Solitude does something dangerous to the human mind. It strips away the distractions. It silences the noise, and in that silence something begins to stir. Without the comforting chaos of the crowd, you are forced to confront the most terrifying question of all. What am I really? For Schopenhauer, this confrontation is inevitable. The moment you step outside the endless loops of status, noise, and imitation, you encounter a truth that most people never dare to face. Life has no built-in meaning. This is why solitude scares so many people, because when you remove the voices telling you who to be, when you stop chasing the dreams that were handed to you, you come face to face with the abyss. the raw, unfiltered reality of existence. Most people run from it. They drown themselves in constant activity, scrolling endlessly, consuming distractions, seeking the illusion of purpose in meaningless rituals. But the rare few, the ones with terrifying intelligence, do something different. They don't run from the abyss, they stare into it. And when they do, something extraordinary happens. Agnes Callard explains this through the lens of aspiration. She says we are not static beings. We are creatures in constant becoming. The abyss is not the end. It is the beginning. When everything collapses, when you strip away society's scripts and expectations, you are finally free to ask, if nothing has meaning by default, then what meaning will I choose to create? This is the terrifying gift of solitude. It forces you to take responsibility for your life. No one else can choose for you anymore. No one else can tell you what success, happiness, or love should look like. That freedom is heavy. It crushes the unprepared. But for the rare few, it ignites a fire. Because once you realize the universe owes you nothing, you stop waiting. You stop begging. You stop searching for permission. You become the one who writes the meaning into existence. And that leads us to the seventh and final terrifying trait, Part 7. The seventh terrifying trait, becoming the architect of your life. There is a point on the path of solitude where you cross an invisible threshold. At first, walking away from the crowd feels isolating, even unbearable. But as time passes, something shifts. You begin to realize that solitude isn't an escape at all. It is the forge where true identity is built. Schopenhauer believed that the highest form of human existence was to live authentically, to stop chasing hollow validation and instead create a life aligned with your inner nature. But he warned, few are capable of this. Most would rather imitate than create. This is what sets the intelligent few apart. They become architects of their existence. Agnes Callard deepens this idea. For her, aspiration isn't just about breaking free from society's scripts. It's about choosing your own transformation. Think about this carefully. You are not trapped in the person you are today. Your identity, your values, your desires, they are not fixed. You can rebuild yourself. You can redefine everything. And solitude is where this rebuilding begins. It is in silence that the mind clears. It is in distance that the patterns reveal themselves. It is in isolation that you finally ask without influence, what kind of human do I want to become? This is the seventh terrifying trait of people who choose solitude. They claim complete authorship of their lives. They become deliberate in their choices, ruthless in their priorities, and fearless in abandoning the versions of themselves that no longer serve who they wish to be. Society cannot control these people, not because they reject it entirely, but because they now engage with it on their own terms. They don't follow the path handed to them. They carve their own. And this is why they are feared. Ending. A mirror for those who dare. So now ask yourself, are you one of them? Do you crave the silence where most people hear nothing, but you hear everything? Do you sense deep inside that you were never meant to live entirely by someone else's design? If yes, then solitude is not your enemy. It is your teacher. But be warned, this path isn't soft. It isn't easy. It isn't comfortable. It demands that you dismantle illusions, confront your emptiness, and take responsibility for crafting your own meaning. Schopenhauer understood the price. Agnes Callard understands the process. And you must decide if you are willing to step into the unknown, because the terrifying intelligence of those who choose to be alone is not about rejecting the world. It's about rebuilding your place in it. The world belongs to those who dare to think for themselves. And sometimes, to think freely, you must first walk alone.